All right, first things first is this is the launch screen. If you have not been here yet, that's what the new launch screen looks like. On this screen here, you have getting started, getting content, getting help. You have some release notes. You have the updater date here, when the last time this was updated. You'll have your username up here. On the very top left corner is your data folder. So if you have any custom campaigns, that is where your actual maps and your tokens and all that stuff, you can put them in manually. If you want to join a campaign, obviously you'd click this button here, the Join Campaign button. As the classic, you would go into your settings, plug in your account data, such as your license key, your user ID, and your password for the Fantasy Grounds forums, and then you connect your account, and then you would click Update, and it pulls in all of your purchases. Now, if you purchased previous content, it should all be there. If not, you need to get a hold of customer service. So anyways, I'm going to get started. So I'm going to host a campaign. And really, I'm not hosting anything. I'm just going to create a session. That's just what they called it. I'm going to go ahead and click New. And in this, I'm going to just give it a name. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to call it Line of Sight Mapping. I don't really have a good name for it. I'm going to click on the rule set. In this case, it's 5e. I am then going to, if you want to put a password or a game master name, you can. So I just put my Laerun here. And then I'm going to set it to private and LAN. So I'm not really going to use it on the cloud, so I don't want to share the session with anyone. So this is going to be a private session. And then you have, your different statuses and such listed around. If you were going to put a password on it, you could. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. Are there any plans to hide the map where players have already traveled so that they don't have instant recollection? Well, line of sight would kind of do that, to be honest. You can still put a mask on it. So technically you can mask it as you go, but they won't be able to go through walls or see the entire map. So once they move through an area, unless they've memorized it, they will not be able to go back and look at it unless they move their token back. So I'm not sure if what you mean by that, but you can actually hide the map, and the actual vision is per character. So you can't see what someone else has explored unless you are in the same light range as they are. So I don't see what the problem would be with the way it is now. But they won't have instant recollection unless they move back to that area. So if someone else moves away and goes to a different part of the map, they won't be able to see that. So each person, when they pick up their token, they basically get the line of sight that they get. There's no cross. It's not like you share the map and once it's explored, it stays open. It's not like that anymore. Yeah, I hope that helps a little. Now we're wanting line of sight based off of vision. Right now, the line of sight will go all the way past unless it hits a wall. So the line of sight isn't true line of sight as far as the rules go, but it's close enough. Because your vision doesn't stop at 30 or 40 feet. It actually keeps going. Unless it hits an object. Okay, so a little bit of difference here. I'm going to go ahead and just load up the SRD. I really don't need any rules, but just in case, I'm going to load the SRD. And that's free. That comes with Fantasy Grounds, so you don't have to worry about, having that problem. And this is just the very base rules. No artwork, nothing fancy. The reason I'm going to use this in case I want to test some of the monsters. And then you have it goes right to your options. So I really don't need to change anything on here. I might get rid of that Smiteworks logo, but other than that, yeah, there's really no need to change anything just for line of sight. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the options the way they are. And I'm going to uncheck this show on load. I don't want this to come back up. I'm going to click finish. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to show you like kind of how the assets are set up now. Used to have, you just go to maps and images and all your images would be in here. Well, that's still true if you have a module or something like that. But you need to go to the asset folder and you actually have 3 separate groups now. You have tokens, you have portraits, and you have images. So there's 3 different categories. And then there's an all button that combines everything. So when you're working with maps, or let's say you want furniture objects, those sort of things, you want those stored in the images category. If you have fancy photos for your characters, such as, let's see, these are the ones that were given to there's a Smiteworks folder, and this was given to people who did the alpha backer. So I have one, this is a KS's dwarf, this is Lady Shells. I don't know who the other people are, but there's some backers in here. So all your portraits go in here, and then your tokens will be in here. So don't get tokens confused with your assets. So if you have a piece of furniture, unless you want that to be a mimic or some kind of NPC, you want to put those in images. So the next thing is when you first come here and you're in a new campaign, you are not going to see a campaign folder right off the bat. The reason for that is you have to actually add something to the campaign folder before it will create the little bag. So that's something that confused me initially. So let's see. One problem we faced was using dynamic light with isometric. Yeah, it's not set up for isometric. That feature is not going to be implemented till the future. So if you're using isometric maps, that is quite a stretch. Unity was not initially set up for 3D. I think that would be a future thing. I don't think they're going to have 3D support for quite a while. So if you're using isometric maps, it's not really going to work the way you'd hope. And if you want to learn to do line of sight on your own after watching videos and that sort of thing, check out that link. There's little step-by-step tutorials. There's also things like, little embedded videos and such. So that's really helpful. All right, so back to the mapping. So right now I don't have anything loaded. No modules except for the SRD. So I think I'm going to actually just load a token module, but I would have to show you that you have to create a campaign folder, but it won't create it until you actually add content. So down below you have a folder button. So I don't know if the stream won't show you this, but I'm actually now in the back end. I'm in the Fantasy Grounds campaigns, light of sight mapping, and then images. So if you create just a folder, like a new folder in here, it will show up as a campaign folder. So let me do this. So I made a subfolder called maps. Once you do that, it should create a folder entitled campaign. So let me see. So no, it didn't actually. So I just put a folder in there and it didn't create the campaign folder yet. So I'm mistaken. So let me open the folder again. And in that same folder, I'm going to put an image. So that should basically parse into a bag. So I'm going to bring out a ship of some sort. So I have a nice boat that I can set up. And this is from Chris from Game Tile Warehouse. This is his ship starter packet. So I'm just going to bring one of those out just to illustrate what we have here. And this is one of my favorite ships. I want to say it's not typical, and it has a lot of cool features. And it should be fairly easy to map. So I'm dragging it in there, and this is a skeletal warship. So not your typical map. I thought for the stream it would be interesting. So right now I do have a folder called campaign. And if I click on it, it actually has the photo now. So you do actually have to put an image in the images folder in order for the campaign folder to be created. So that is something you should know right off the bat. So what I would do is make subfolders in that category. So have one with all your maps and then have one with all your props. So if you wanted to decorate your ship with more stuff, you'd probably want to have like a asset folder with all your little furniture and such. And then the other folder would be full of maps, whatever props you want. You can also have other layers. So if you're good with Photoshop, you can make a mask yourself and layer it on top so it looks like it's nighttime or however you want to do it. It's pretty cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add this map to the maps and images folder. So from the assets folder, you need to open up maps and images on the side here in this area. And right now I don't have anything. So I'm going to go ahead and make a different category. Right now it's all or uncategorized. So the reason I'm doing this is so that I have an organized area as to where I added my images. So I'm going to click Edit Groups. And this is a good habit to have anyways, regardless of what you create. And Add Category. And I'm just going to call this, Warship or something. Actually, this is going to be an orc or some kind of undead warship. So I'm going to call it the Necromancer's Warship. So once I'm done editing that, now I have my own category. So that way, whatever I bring in here, it's going to show up and it's going to basically make it to where, I can find where my stuff is. So I'm going to drag it over. And once you drag it over, it's going to create a image file or a image in that folder like we're used to, except for we didn't have the tools. So now I have this huge skeletal warship that I need to put line of sight on and such. This one actually might be interesting since it's got all the shadow and that sort of thing. So it might be a little bit actually more difficult to do because there's more texture than it is actual substance. So we'll see. So this ship is basically an undead warship, and you sacrifice blood into these mouths, and that's what powers the ship. And then you also have slave rowers underneath, and they are skeletons that are animated by the necromancer. That's kind of cool. So anyways, if you're looking at a map and you start getting off-centered, you can use this little gray or this little golden thing to zoom in and out. But I think it's much easier to use your mouse wheel. And then if you want to actually center it again, what I'm going to do is make the frame the way I want it, which is like this. And I'm going to right-click on the map, click on View, and then zoom to fit. And that'll recenter the map. So that's something you're going to have to get used to. It's a little different than Classic. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. And then again, I'm going to hit View, Zoom to fit. So I have a better better idea. Now, if you want to actually have it closer to full screen, you can do this and do the same thing. So that way you can see it better. So that is basically one of your first steps, is kind of get used to how it moves and how to navigate to get it centered if you need to. Next thing I'm going to do is actually title this. So this is the original title, Ship Starter Skeletal Warship. So I'm actually going to take that off. I'm going to call it map, comma, the Necromancer's Skeletal Warship. Now that title is for basically for me. So if I lock this, the characters won't see this if I put on the unidentified symbol here. So what I'll do here is just put skeleton ship. So now when my players see this image, when I share it with them, they'll see this instead of this title here. This is for the game master. This is for the players. If you don't intend to show this to players, you don't have to worry about it. But to share this photo, you would right click on it, click share sheet, and that would share it amongst your party. But you don't want to do that unless you're done with actually creating or working on the map itself. So I just wanted you to understand that you can still share it like you used to. Now the next step is to add a grid. So I'm going to unlock this, and up on top here are your main tools. And then you have subtools for each one of these different tools up here. And then you have functions down here. So right now, this ship is the layer that I'm working on. But I want to go to the map grid, and I want to put a grid on top of this. So what's nice about Fantasy Grounds the way it is now is that you have a little bit more flexibility with moving the grid around, and you can actually type in the value. And right now there's a 50 grid, which looks to me a little big. So I think I'm going to go with 30. Yeah, that's a lot closer. So I'm going to go with 30. And then you could change the color. So right now it's kind of a whitish gray color, but if you wanted to make it red or a different shape, you could. In this case, maybe you want it to be a bright red. So you could change the color so it stands out for you if you want. So I made it a green kind of color so that you can see the grid a little bit better. You can't change the width of the actual lines. I've been asked that before. This line here, unless you make an extension or change the back end, I don't think you can change that. So as far as the colors though, you can, and the shape. You can also toggle visibility, so you can actually turn the grid off even though it's still there. So that's really cool. So when your characters are on the map, and if you don't want the grid tool on, you can actually turn that off, and they'll still snap to grid, but it won't be visible. That might be cool for show and tell and that sort of thing, but for game's sake, I would leave the grid on. Okay, so the next step is we got the grid on, and I kind of have it scaled to where I want it. So now what I want to do is start looking at how I want to handle the line of sight. So you kind of got to look at the map, study it a little bit. So in this case, I don't really have any open doors per se. So if I go to the layer mode, I can use the arrow keys to shift and hold down control and actually shift the map instead of the grid. It's kind of cool how you and you can do smaller incremental shifts. There's really not any sort of entrance or mouth, or like these things probably are your only entrances. So what I'm going to probably do is line this out as terrain. I don't think that's going to be a hard stop. These things here, though, these are going to have to be terrain as well. Well, not even that, because if you put line of sight over that, it's going to block the vision when actually these are over the top. So probably not those either. So I'll put line of sight on the outside of the boat. And then I probably will use this part as terrain because you can probably walk out on top of this nasty looking rib piece. So this one's actually a little bit different on line of sight. And then you have these little oars, which I'm going to leave that. So most of the detail is going to be left. Okay. So there's that. And I'm going to change this back to 30, I think. Oops, that was the map size. So again, I'm going to center it. Kind of got off centered. And then I'm going to go back to the, yeah, so it's still set at 30. Okay. So now 30 looks a little bit small, but I have this zoomed at like 100%, so that's why it's like this. So as you can see, it gets a little bit blurry. So I'm going to go back to the map tool. Let's go with 60% maybe. So you have to make sure that you're on the actual layer. And what this is doing is scaling the entire map. Yeah, that's a lot closer. There we go. So that's scaled up to 75%. I don't think I want to go any higher than that because it gets too blurry. Now I want to go to the line of sight tool. Yeah, so the actual squares look about right. Because if you look at some of these skull sizes, it's pretty close. So you got to remember that you're working in layers. So if you want to affect this top layer with the map, you have to be on this layer. Because technically you can have a whole bunch of different layers. You just have to remember which one you're on. So it doesn't allow you to rename layers. So if you're going to work with a lot of layers, make sure you name them properly. Okay, so I'm going to go to the line of sight tool, and you have these subtools. So you have a pointer or a selection tool. You have the line tool. You have the rectangle tool, and you have the ellipse. So I'm going to try to use the ellipse tool on this. I could never figure out how to use it, but I have to master it. So I'm going to click on the ellipse tool, and I'm going to hit shift and drag. So that's pretty decent. And then what I'm going to do is hit this selection tool. You see I made a mistake. I only grabbed one line. So I want to double click, and that selects everything. So this is the ellipse tool. It's really hard to make small circles, so you might have to do that by hand. But that's basically one of those pillars. And you can hit the shift tool or the arrow keys to move it. So that should be done with that. When you're done editing and you want out, I just hit escape. And that'll take you from moving it around or drawing extra lines. So I had a lot of trouble with that ellipse tool. It was hard. Can you change the position of the image, like make the boat north? Yeah, I think you can actually. If you actually edit the layer that you're on. So if you go to layers and then you select the layer and then you change the orientation, the angle, let's say 90, you totally can. You can do it manually, but it's better if you do it in degrees of an angle, because when you try to do it manually, you're not always going to be dead nuts. So you probably want to leave it. Just use this angle here for that. So put that back where I had it. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, if you do it manually, it's hard to keep it. Yeah, it's hard to keep it straight though. Make sure you use degrees if you can help it. Sometimes you need that little finesse. If you need the finesse, turn off the magnet or the snap to grid, because if you leave this magnet on and you're trying to, it drives you nuts. It'll try to connect to the next line. So if you really need a little detail and you want more control, you turn that off temporarily, and you can get into all these little places here and clean it up. But then make sure you turn it back on, because it's actually very helpful. The thing that's going to trip you up the most using line of sight in the beginning is until it becomes second nature. You have to remember what tool you're on. So I'm still on the pointer. So I'm not going to be drawing lines with the pointer. You got to go on the line tool to do dot to dot, or however you want to do it. So the other way to handle this circle is to just manually go around and plot points. I kind of like the ellipse tool if I understand how it works. So again, I'm just going to hold the shift key and stretch it out. And that gives me an idea. Then when I want to select the lines, you have to go to the selection tool. You cannot do it right from making the line. And then you need to double click to select all the points. Otherwise, you'll just stretch one point. Now, if you wanted to delete all those, you can hit the delete key, and there's another shortcut key. I think it's space bar or something like that. It'll delete it. But now that I have all the points selected, now I can single click and grab this and move it. Yeah, that's good enough. So now I'm going to hit escape, and that takes me out of the edit mode. So now I'm back to this pointer mode, and I'm not going to draw any vagrant lines. So those are going to be some hard lines that you cannot see through. Unless you want these to be a place where people can jump on top of, then you'd have to make it terrain. In this case, I'm just going to make them solid. The other thing is these bones here, these go over the top, so it'd be hard to draw these in because of visibility reasons, because if you come from an angle and you're underneath those, you should be able to see. So I have to leave those open. The terrain tool would allow you to block the vision, and then you can unlock them as you move, but that's still not quite the right usage. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to actually draw terrain inside the mouths, so that this would indicate like it's an opening, but you can't just go in. There's really not going to be a door. It's just these two openings are actually where you put the fuel in, and the fuel is a fresh body. And then once it's done, it spits you out and it fills this container up. And then the necromancer, his helm is back here, and what he does is he animates these undead as he needs them. So he's got a whole shipload of things, and then when he gets slaves, they strip them down, they make them row the ship along with some skeleton rowers, and then once they get to the point where they're useless, they put them up on the deck here and they feed them into the ship. And this gives the ship its auxiliary thrust or power or protection or whatever you want to make it. You can use this in Avernus or something like that. Yep, you're welcome. So now what I'm going to do is actually start plotting some of the exterior. So I haven't quite decided how I want to do it, but I know one thing for sure is that if you have an arc like this, you can probably do it easier by hand. You could start it with this circle tool and then delete half of it, but I think it would be easier just to plot it, by hand. And I'm not going to plot, everything out. I'm going to plot along this imaginary line here, this gum line, I guess you could call it. So I'm going to go ahead and plot in here. So I'm going to go to the line tool, and all you have to do is single click, and then you're going to stretch the tool where you want it and click again. So every so often, you leave a point. The more intricate the shape, the harder this is, and the more points you need. So when you're selecting a map, don't select something like this unless you want to spend the time doing this. By no means does this have to be perfect, especially if it's like a homebrew thing. I mean, if you're making a module for somebody, you want to take your time with it. But if you're just doing this for yourself, who cares? Unless you're a real stickler. So when I'm done plotting my points, or you want to take a break, you hit escape and it won't draw anymore. It'll get out of the edit mode. So occasionally you zoom out to see where you're at, see where you need to go, and then zoom back in and get on it. So I'm going to take a quick break because I don't want to get my eyes whacked out. Is there any questions? Yes, you could do that. It depends. If you're adventuring, you'd probably do both sides of the wall if you plan to have people boarding the ship or on the ship. So it depends on whereabouts you're going to have your adventure. You could do it on both sides of the line. Yes, so if you're adventuring on the boat, yes, it definitely put more emphasis on the outer edge. But since you can be either or, you'd probably do both the inner and the outer edge. I've been told to keep it on the edge, not put it on the edge. You just got to do what works for you. So it depends on how you're using the map as well. So once I want to go back, I just click on the last dot. So I'm just kind of roughly following this gum line. So right here, I'm going to make this terrain because I want them to be able to see it and use this area to walk on. But the problem is it looks like it's elevated, so that might be something I want to check out. But here I would continue to make my red line or the actual, what do you call it, the terrain. So this here, at this point, I would probably go back and do the outer side. So it could take you a while to do this. So if you're going to do line of sight, you have to have some time and patience, especially when you're just learning. You don't know all the shortcuts. I'm still learning what they are. So I'm going to get a smaller area of the boat done. I'm not going to do the entire ship. So that will be good for right now to give you an idea. Now for the terrain. So I'm going to use the terrain tool, which is the Christmas tree. That's what I call it. And I'm going to use the line tool, but you have the rectangle, the circle. So I'm going to go ahead and line this out. It's going to be manually plotted. So it might not be perfect. I mean, this might not be a good use for it. But seeing that it's elevated and it's kind of more of an entryway, I'm going to do that for it. So it kind of illustrates that, you can't just walk right up on it. You have to step up to it or, something like that. Probably up to your shoulders or maybe even up higher than that. Now you see I screwed this line up. So what you can do with this is you can hit the selection tool, click on that dot and hit delete. And you see it'll go like this. So you want to click on this and you can stretch it if you want. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that. So I'm just going to bring it to this, and then I'm going to delete this little segment. Oops. There we go. And then if you want to get rid of this whole thing right here, which I'm going to, you can hit this delete points, and then you can highlight the area that you want to get rid of. So that way you can kind of start over. In this case, I'm just going to go back to the line tool. And you can hit Control Z. And then what you can do is go to the selection tool. Oops. I'm on terrain, selection tool. There we go. Now I'm going to go back to the line tool. Yeah, see, I got this all buggered up. So, like I said, you can click on delete points and go to the pointer, highlight them, and that selects all the dots, and that gets rid of it. So now you want to be in selection mode and probably the line tool if you want to draw another point. So I'm going to select this point here. And see if I can drag it. Okay. Going back to the line tool. Yeah, see, it wants to continue a new line. But anyways, you can add more points. And then I could actually go back to the pointer tool, click on this line, and you see you can delete certain points if you want. Now it made it too. Oh boy. But anyways, you get the idea. There we go. We just merged it. So anyhow, there's your landscape type thing. And what'll happen is these will actually be two sections, not the end of the world. But if you want to remove it, you can start over or you can re-stretch it. You can do a lot of different things to it. Okay, let's see. So let's just say you had the line of sight done. I forgot to hit escape. Okay, so let's say you have the line of sight done. Then what you want to do is go to your play mode. And then you need to have a character. So right now I don't have any yet, but I'm going to import. So a nice thing about this new Unity is that every character you make, regardless of what campaign, is manageable from the PC area. Really wish Classic would have done that a long time ago. But anyways, you can import any character that you've already created. So I'll just do this Dorig here. So it gives you dialogue that you've brought it in. So now I have a character. So I'm going to put him on the combat tracker. Drag it up here. Gonna give him a token, I guess. All right. So now once you put him on the map, you have to first enable line of sight. So there's a little button, enable and disable. So this is with the line of sight enabled. And once you pick up the tool or the token, your line of sight will start becoming visible. So for the terrain, if you click open, it allows the light to shine through. Yep. So anyways, that's kind of how you would start using your line of sight. And when you want to get really fancy, you can go to, let's see, you have to unlock the map if you want to edit it. So let's say you wanted some mist or some kind of clouds or something. You can click on layers, and you click on effects, which are the built-in layer effects. You highlight that, and then you go to the effects tool, or the selection tool, and I'm going to pick mist. Then you got that cloudy mist over the top. So now when you're adventuring, you got these clouds rolling over the top or some kind of mist or smoke, who knows. So that's something you can do with Unity. And if you were going to add more items, like little things, let me see if I have a token or an asset that I can add. So I'm going to go to my assets folder and I'll click on images. And I want a coil of rope. So I probably have something. There we go. But that's a JPEG, so it's not really what I was looking for, because that'll show all the white inside there. So let me try a chair. I'm going to get this rickety old wooden chair. So I'm going to drag the chair, and now it's a separate layer. See, you can shift the layers. You can have the mist underneath the photo or above. So I have it above both the chair and the ship. Now, I had the chair underneath the ship, so be careful with that. Now I'm going to scale it. So you can either type or try to drag it. I just type, so I'm going to go with like 1.5. There we go. And then if you want to rotate it, you can rotate it. There's your degrees if you want to type it in. So you can add assets to this. Then when you're in play mode, you can't move it. So you can actually customize what's on the boat if you want. Really think the more less detailed the map is in this case, it might be better. Depending on what you're going to do. There we go. So that is basically how you use line of sight. I haven't perfected the paint tools yet, but if you want to use a texture or a brush or a stamp or some sort, you can. So I'm going to go to stamp mode, and I'm going to drag a blood splatter. So I'm going to go to assets, and I'm going to go to blood, searching for blood, and I do have some. So here's a blood splatter. So you can stamp these on your map, or you can also use the you can use images like this for a paintbrush. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you wanted to paint instead of stamping, you have the eraser tool where you can erase stuff on the paint layer. If I do a line tool, you actually get kind of like a textured line you can draw. So you can paint with just about any shape you want, which is good for making textures. But if you really want just a basic line, you need to find an image that's basically like a rough line, like a wall or something. But that is basically some of the things you can do with Unity. So that's the basics. There's a lot more functionality and tools in here. There are people who are much better at this than I am, but at least wanted to show the community that it's not impossible. That all you need to really remember is, first, find a map that's not this complex. Secondly, remember which tool you're in. So up on top, play mode is where you want to test it out, see if it's working or not. You have to have a character token. The other thing is layer mode, so you can adjust your layers, or you can actually bring in tiles. And actually, instead of having a full painted map, you can put tiles together using the stamp tool. Or you can paint things on if you want, like I've done here. You have an effects layer. This is not editable in any way, but this is where you would select the effect. But in order to add the effects, you have to go down to the bottom, and you need to. And then you have mask mode, which is kind of like what we used to do back in the day. You still have that. And then you can reveal an area just like we used to do. And then line of sight layer or tools. Remember, you have wall, terrain, door, and secret door. But the main thing you need to remember is which tool are you in. So when you want to edit things, like delete and move them, you need to be in the pointer mode. If you want to draw lines and circles and squares, and you need to be in those modes. So make sure, and then you can duplicate paint layer as walls. So that's kind of cool. So anyways, hopefully that helps you guys. I've been rambling here for about an hour, so I think I'm good. Any questions about this, just go back and watch the video. I'll upload it later. If you are still confused and you don't know what's going on, I really recommend going to the new wiki guide. I mean, it's not going to walk you through it. It's not going to hold your hand, but it definitely gives you some stuff. So that is the link for that. Yeah, the blood splatter tool is kind of cool. You got to pick the right kind of terrain, because it really will look like you're painting on top of a layer instead of actually following the contour. So any other questions? All right, I think I'm going to call that wrap, and hopefully I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.